In early 2022, the algorithmic stablecoin UST had become the third largest stablecoin of any kind by market cap, and then spectacularly failed over a number of hours, wiping out some $60 billion US. This event was likely a key trigger that led to several other major collapses that year, including that of FTX. In the wake of the UST collapse with fear riding high, USDC, with its ultra-safe fiat reserve, appeared to benefit and brought a strong challenge to rival USDT for the spot of top stablecoin. But then, in a twist that nobody saw coming, USDC lost its peg in 2023. And this forces us to ask an existential question. If USDC depegged, can USDC or any other stablecoin ever be truly safe? So that opening cut gives you a preview to the major market events that we're going to be grappling with. But to get there, we need a solid grip on the foundations first. These foundations will not only help you understand how stablecoins work, but also help you understand important facts about the very nature of money itself. So let's start at the top. Why do stablecoins matter? One answer we could give is to point out that today stablecoins are a huge part of the blockchain ecosystem. At the time of this recording, Messari's data states that they represent a total of $122 billion in market cap out of a total of $1.08 trillion for the digital asset class. That's more than 10%. These are big economic numbers that are leaving a significant footprint in the off-chain world of the so-called real economy, with one of the leading stablecoins, Tether, now buying $72.5 billion worth of US Treasury bills. That makes them one of the top 22 global buyers, ahead of the UAE, Mexico, Australia, and Spain. These figures alone would satisfy a lot of people as an explanation for why stablecoins are important. But if you follow my content on this channel, you'll know that I have an irredeemable obsession with getting to the deeper, real why. That's the why that helps explain why stablecoins are such a large part of the market today and why they are essential for blockchain's future and for the breakthrough to broad-based adoption of blockchain technology. And it will also help us to understand how stablecoins work themselves. So let's get to those fundamentals first. Complex economies rely upon a common medium of exchange. And I'm not even talking about modern-day economies here. The larger-scale civilizations of our ancient ancestors all made use of money in one form or another. It really is quite hard to imagine how you could grow and sustain diversified, interconnected economies that are many times larger than closely knit communities otherwise. The way this is explained in traditional economics classes is using a just-so story of an imaginary prehistorical economy without money, a tale of the so-called barter economy, which was first popularized by the father of economics, Adam Smith. And I was literally about to retell that same story myself, but very luckily, related research brought me to David Graeber's book, Debt, the First 5,000 Years, where he makes perfectly clear that the barter economy that I'm sure you have heard about at some point never actually happened historically in the way that it's figured, and economists have effectively been peddling a fairy tale for hundreds of years. But all the same, as David implicitly acknowledges, the barter economy tale remains a good thought experiment to help surface and reveal key attributes of the coin-based money systems that our economies inherit from today, which is crucial to help us understand why stablecoins are important. So let's begin by imagining we are in some less technologically advanced society, but one that still has specialized economic roles and professions. And imagine that you are a crop farmer in the society and that you want some milk. But without a system of transferable money or credit, all that you could do to create an exchange would be to offer your own crops in exchange for milk. Now, imagine what a headache it would be to have to figure out how many crops you need to get the milk that you want from the dairy farmer, and at the same time, perhaps not be able to get some tools that you need from the ironmonger because they already have all the crops they need. This would be a mess. And a common medium of exchange helps to improve it in several ways. It simplifies the pricing of these goods in terms of a common unit of account. And it simplifies the matching of wants and trades that are now all able to route through this common medium. This system enables economies to support a greater variety of productive activity, for economic value to be exchanged between greater numbers of people, and also, with durable coins or accounts, it allows us to manage economic resources over longer periods of time. A key property that we need from our medium of exchange in order to reap these benefits is for it to hold a stable value. It would be no good if you charge and accept a fee of 100 tokens for some of your work, expecting that to pay for a week's worth of food if tomorrow you then discover that they only pay for a single day's worth. Those of us 40 or younger who were lucky enough to grow up in economies with stable local currencies probably never gave any thought to the importance of price stability until quite recently. But even with the fresh inflationary challenges that many of us are going through today, our economies continue to function. And that's because the stability of our currencies doesn't have to be perfect in order for them to be of benefit. But it is also clear that once we stray past some level of instability, we will give up on a medium of exchange altogether and turn to the next best asset that's suited. So hopefully this all convinces you that we need stable value assets to support any kind of large and diverse modern economy. But if we look at the native crypto assets, their prices are anything but stable. So in their current state, none of them are able to provide this indispensable foundational economic service, certainly not to the standard that's demanded by our most complex and high-performing economies of today. And so if this crucial instrument is absent from our blockchain networks, that would dramatically restrict the kinds of economic actions and services that blockchains are able to provide. In order for blockchains to have a chance of truly going head-to-head with our traditional economies, they need to have a stable value asset that is just as good as the best currencies used for exchange in our off-chain world. And sorry if this spoils any doomsday or revolutionary fantasies for some of you watching, but for the foreseeable future, that currency happens to be the US dollar. And yes, I am well aware of the announcements recently made by the BRICS+6, but I don't think they matter much. The dollar's strength isn't just down to its use in international trade. It owes to the size, openness, and transparency of the US economy, to the quality of its legal system and its investment opportunities. That's not something that 10 disparate countries can come around to engineer voluntarily. Certainly not with the CCP dropping economic indicators faster than you can say socialism with Chinese characteristics. If you want to dig deeper into these ideas, I recommend Patrick Boyle's video on the topic. But let's not digress, because whatever you happen to think about US dollar dominance, the currency in question isn't so much the issue here. As long as that currency is not blockchain native, we have an engineering problem that needs to be solved. How do we get our best off-chain money, in this case the US dollar, onto the blockchain? It is not as straightforward as you might think. Let's start with the dollar that probably pops into your head when someone mentions the word, the physical paper bill. Now, how do we get that into the blockchain? There is no link between this physical thing and the blockchain. I can't push it into some kind of portal that teleports it into the blockchain realm. Now, I'm sure some of you are going to reply that this is an absurd objection to make because we've solved the physical to digital problem for our ordinary money already. Thanks to our technology and the best of our laws and institutions, high-quality financial intermediaries operate private digital ledgers that maintain a reliable link between physical cash and electronic records that control the cash that we rightfully own in a trustworthy and reliable manner. Safe, correct, and reliable operation of these private digital ledgers now allow us to transact digitally with each other without having to route through the medium of physical cash. So our money and what we can do with it has already substantially been dematerialized and digitized. But the thing is, these intermediaries who operate and maintain these private money ledgers do so as legal and highly regulated businesses. And so they have all stayed well away from blockchain networks until quite recently. Because of this, their private digital ledgers don't communicate or interface with public blockchain ledgers, and that effectively creates a separation between them that's just as hard as the one we would have if we had never figured out how to digitize dollars at all. Those intermediaries have been staying away from blockchain for a full 10 years. So it's fallen to independent third parties to come up with ways to create tokens that offer their bearers stability that is on par with the US dollar natively on blockchain networks. But the key test of any such efforts does not sit within their direct control. It comes down to whether millions of free and independent people who trade in open digital asset exchange markets handle these stablecoins as if they had the same value as one US dollar. This recognition in public markets is vital, because if nobody gives you a dollar for your dollar, then it isn't worth a dollar. So without a connection to our off-chain money system, the quest to make blockchain-native stablecoins has, in a sense, amounted to reinventing money all over again on the blockchain. And so it's not surprising that the solutions that have emerged mirror and retrace approaches that have already been tried in our earlier financial history. So let's take a quick look back. One of the most influential forms of money has been commodity money. In this system, exchanges and transactions are settled with physical stuff that was often intrinsically valuable in and of itself, or was useful to a large enough amount of people to allow it to function as a medium of exchange. Gold and silver coins are the iconic example here. Now, this sounds good, but we have a problem. We can't replicate commodity money on our blockchains. There is no blockchain asset that has the same kind of broad intrinsic utility or status of any of the commodity monies that we used in the past. At this point, at least, many of the Bitcoin faithful expect that this is what Bitcoin will become someday. To find a model that works for us today, we can look for inspiration at the next iteration of our money technology in recent history, and that was representative money. In this system, paper notes were issued by agents and institutions with assurances that these paper receipts would be converted or redeemed for some specific underlying asset. In this sense, the paper represents something else of value, which gives this money system its name. What you see here is a close-up of a UK banknote, which offers a clear legacy of that system with these words that say, "I promise to pay the bearer the sum of 5, 10, 20, 50 pounds as it may happen to be." So let's now ask ourselves, why did this shift from commodity money over to representative money happen? Well, it's a complex story and one that David Graeber once again tells very well in great detail. But if you'll allow me to summarize, representative money emerged following the establishment of depository institutions that provided greater convenience and security over the storage of valuable commodity assets. Think of how inconvenient and risky it is to keep all that gold at home once you have more than a certain amount. Your deposit of gold was recognized by the depository institution with a receipt, and eventually people realized that trading these receipts was more convenient than settling transactions directly with the heavy, inflexible metal commodities that backed them. There's one key adjustment that was necessary for this to be able to happen, and that's for those receipts to not make any requirement on who shows up to redeem the claim. Just holding the note is fully sufficient to grant the bearer of the note rightful claim to a redemption, which is why these notes are called bearer instruments. Let's now give all of this one more turn to examine the psychology of what's going on in this transition, because that's also insightful. This transition happened because people started to value the convenience of a new medium of exchange, paper over metal. But they weren't yet invested in the economic value of that paper in and of itself. So hopefully you can see that we're in a very similar situation today. Blockchains have the capacity to create forms of money or media of exchange that offer several superior conveniences, certainly over paper money and probably over existing versions of our digital money as well. But at this point, blockchains are still very new, and we're not invested in the value of the blockchain tokens themselves. Certainly not with blockchain's early outlaw reputation and all the genuinely horrific headlines and price volatility that continue to tar this space. And so it makes sense that this model of representative money or reserve-backed money offers an appropriate way forward to bring trusted, stable value onto the blockchain. So if you create or issue these digital tokens, just like the banks issued their paper notes, and design them so that their underlying claims are fully transferable, effectively making them like bearer instruments, and if people believe that you have the, quote, real money to back up the face value of the token, that should allow those tokens to be exchanged in free and open markets for that same real value. And that's vital, right? Because remember what I said earlier, if nobody gives you $1 for your dollar, then it's not worth $1. So just before we dive into how these reserve-backed models are being implemented to create stablecoins on blockchains, we need to understand one more feature of our off-chain money system. And that's the fact that today we no longer operate a representative money system. Instead, we use a fiat money system. In this system, our money is not directly backed or redeemable at a set rate for a specific underlying asset. The money is instead proposed to have value by legal decree. It is issued and managed by a governing authority. And you can find evidence of this same kind of legal force in text that's printed on the US dollar, which asserts this note is legal tender for all debts, public and private. As long as authorities manage the supply of money in a way that allows money to maintain its stable value and other properties that we expect from it, fiat money will be handled as trusted money, and it will serve its economic purpose. And actually, this was not too far removed from how representative money was already functioning and circulating without regular large-scale redemptions by its bearers. So the fiat nature of our money system and the current dominance of the US dollar means that the asset most people would take confidence from to back token issuance on blockchains is no longer gold, but US dollars. And this leads to an ironic twist. Dollars can be converted into anything, and anything can be converted into dollars. So paradoxically, that actually means that you can fund reserves with any other dollar-convertible asset, so long as those assets are valuable and liquid enough to be sold for dollars to satisfy redemption claims on demand. And that's why, even though the most important stablecoins all follow reserve-backed issuance models, there is still a really big difference between them on account of how those reserves are funded, what we can refer to as their reserve structure. So let's look at some of those differences. One of the clearest distinctions that we can draw between stablecoins is based on the broad class of assets that are used to fund the stablecoin's reserve, which generally fall into one of three categories: crypto-backed, commodity-backed, or fiat-backed. Now, I guess the strangest item on this list is the first one, which is saying that there are stablecoins which have reserves that are backed by other native crypto assets. Given the way that I explained the stablecoin design problem, this design approach might seem like a flat-out contradiction. We are trying to create confidence in the value of blockchain tokens by backing them with other blockchain tokens. That doesn't make sense intuitively. It doesn't add up. But actually, it can work. The response to this problem that these stablecoin designs offer is to overfund their reserves so that they hold much, much more dollar value at current market prices than is needed to back the total stated dollar value of stablecoins issued. This is an approach known as over-collateralization. It works by creating the reassurance that even if, or rather when, the prices of the reserve assets fall, the reserve would still hold enough dollar value in total to satisfy redemption claims made on demand. Perhaps you think that there's simply no amount of over-collateralization in crypto assets that could make these reserves feel safe. If so, you're not alone. These stablecoin designs have proved to be the least widely adopted today, but I think it's fair to note and appreciate that these designs are motivated by a distinct goal. Not only do they want to create a stable value asset, they also want to create stable assets that are much more independent, free of the influence from established financial actors and sovereign states, and crypto-native tokens are perceived to have those kind of attributes. I think this is an interesting aim to explore, and it could promote some healthy currency competition in the long run, but in the short run, there are much, much vaster and more important economic gains to be claimed by bootstrapping our first generation of stablecoins to the US dollar more directly. It's also worth noticing that over-collateralized reserve models effectively impose a higher cost on the creation of trusted, stable value, because you need more than $1 worth of value to create one single stable unit of dollar value. In this sense, over-collateralized reserve models are not capital efficient. So that covers crypto-backed stablecoins. Next up are commodity-backed stablecoins. Now, when you come across this term, make doubly sure to read the fine print, because this term is actually being used to refer to two very different kinds of assets. The first of these definitions, which the term was originally created to describe, was for a stablecoin which had the price of a physical commodity as its reference, not the US dollar. What this means in practical terms is that a token's value would be stable with regard to some physical measure of that underlying commodity. A single token could represent a troy ounces worth of gold, for example. In this case, the stability is fixed to that troy ounce. But that means that the dollar value of the token could vary like for like with the variation of the dollar price of the troy ounce of gold. The second sense in which stablecoins are described as being commodity-backed is when a stablecoin is designed to reference and hold a stable value in relation to the US dollar. But in this case, the commodity held is an asset in reserve that can be sold for US dollars to honor US dollar value redemption claims. This is the same design concept as we discussed earlier for the crypto-backed reserve model, except that instead of crypto assets, we now have physical commodities funding the reserve. Here again, careful risk management has to be applied to ensure that the volatility of the underlying asset does not impair the ability of the reserve to hold its dollar peg. Over-collateralization may be implemented to achieve that, although depending on the underlying commodity, less over-collateralization is probably going to be needed than the amount required to offer an equivalent assurance with crypto-backed reserves. Now, regardless of which type of commodity-backed token we're discussing, a physical commodity backing is expected to play a much larger role going forward, owing to the rapid acceleration of real-world asset tokenization, or RWA, as it's called. Essentially, a lot of progress has been made on the tricky item of coordinating physical asset control with blockchain tokens. Good legal and operational processes have been developed for managing the physical assets so that they can be tokenized with high-quality legal assurances made to token holders over some specified benefit relating to that physical underlying. And at the same time, awareness and confidence over these practices are spreading and are becoming increasingly well accepted. The end result of this is that the financial value associated with a diverse range of physical assets, ranging from real estate to gold to rare whiskey, is beginning to flow into blockchain networks where they can be handled and operated upon per the actions of the people and protocol services that are active on these networks. That includes the possibilities of RWAs being used to support stablecoin services. As that happens, I expect we'll see a shift in terminology describing commodity-backed reserves as just being RWA-backed. But as you probably gathered by this point, you always have to read the fine print to really understand what's going on. And with that, we reach the last reserve type on our list, where the reserves are funded by fiat-denominated assets. And as you would guess correctly, this is finally the type of reserve that actually holds US dollars inside it. But actually, it's broader than that, potentially including many kinds of immaterial financial assets such as government bonds or corporate bonds and the like. As a side note, since these assets are native to the off-chain world, they are also starting to be referred to as RWAs, just so that you're aware. Now you might ask, why stop there? Why not include stocks, equity indices, derivatives? The answer is that the purpose and required operation of stablecoin and its reserves constrain the kind of fiat assets that are considered acceptable to be included inside it. Remember that this reserve has the key objectives of making sure that it is adequately funded with liquid assets. And now, to strike a defining contrast with the other kinds of reserves models that we've been looking at, it's also important that these assets have low price volatility and low non-cash risk exposures. Together, these enhance the security of the value backing, and they reduce or eliminate the need for over-collateralization. But even with these restrictions, we still have significant room for interpretation. And this is one of the key factors sitting at the heart of the differences between the two leading fiat-backed stablecoins today, which are USDT and USDC. USDC sticks to assets which in themselves reflect a more conservative liquidity and risk profile. This means it's limited to cash, short-term US Treasuries, and very, very similar instruments. USDT, on the other hand, hold a fiat reserve portfolio that includes riskier holdings of short-dated corporate bonds and even some non-tokenized physical commodities. There are other significant differences between USDC and USDT that relate to their governance and their custody policies, but I'll be covering those in the next video of this stablecoin series. For us today, that completes the review of the main reserve-backed models that we brought up on our list. Note that while plenty of stablecoins have chosen to stick to funding their reserves purely in terms of one of these three broad asset classes, some of them mix and match. MakerDAO's DAI is the best example here. It uses a combination of multi-asset reserve diversification, governance, and smart contract mechanics to maintain its peg. But you can use the same principles that we've been introduced to today to analyze and evaluate the reserve component of DAI's design. One final point to note before we wrap up is that if you look up stablecoin types on the internet for yourself, you are sure to find reference to another class of stablecoins known as algorithmic stablecoins. I won't say too much about them today because they also come in a variety of complex designs that would require a whole other video to explain properly. Suffice to say today that they are distinguished from the reserve-backed models we've been looking at because algorithmic designs do not place a strong reliance on externally sourced reserve assets to try and maintain their dollar peg, if they have any such reserves at all. Today, algorithmic stablecoins form a very small part of the stablecoin landscape. Their main significance comes down to the fact that one of them was at the center of one of the most disruptive collapses that the industry has seen up until that point. In early 2022, the algorithmic stablecoin UST had become the third largest stablecoin of any kind by market cap, and then spectacularly failed over a number of hours, wiping out some $60 billion US. This event was likely a key trigger that led to several other major collapses that year, including that of FTX. In the wake of the UST collapse with fear riding high, USDC, with its ultra-safe fiat reserve, appeared to benefit and brought a strong challenge to rival USDT for the spot of top stablecoin. But then, in a twist that nobody saw coming, USDC lost its peg in 2023. And this forces us to ask an existential question. If USDC depegged, can USDC or any other stablecoin ever be truly safe? That is the core question that we are going to examine in the next video. And we'll be doing that with the benefit of all the detailed understanding that you've acquired today. So I'll see you then.